Hello and welcome to Module 4 of the Crossover Prevention Case Planning for Child Welfare Workers. During Module 4, we'll spend some time reviewing the key takeaways from Module 1, 2, and 3. I'll cover several recommendations and I'll provide an opportunity for you to consider and commit to possible changes in your case planning and management practices. Feel free to follow along in your workbook as I review the information. Let's begin with a brief review of the key information delivered in Modules 1, 2, and 3. So it's important from Module 1, it's important to recognize youth who are disproportionately impacted by crossing over into the juvenile justice system. A deeper understanding of how and why these youth are impacted will increase your willingness and your ability to make changes to the system itself. So when you're thinking about this, remember back to Module 1, recognizing youth who are disproportionately impacted. These are youth who are Black and Brown youth, girls, LGBTQ, GNCT, youth between ages of 11 and 14, and youth who are in institutional placement. So having a better understanding of that will increase your ability to do some effective case planning. Now remember, also in Module 1, we talked about the warning signs or the pathways which we connected to risks and needs in Module 2 and 3. Now these include mental health and substance use, receipt of mental health or substance use services, repeat maltreatment, multiple placements, truancy, discipline, academic performance, and special education needs. Increasing your ability to identify these warning signs or pathways will allow you to initiate effective case planning and management strategies before youth cross over into the juvenile justice system. In Module 2, we discussed the importance of assessing strengths, needs, and the socio-historical context. Remember that these case planning management activities are interrelated. If the goal of case planning and management is to reduce risk and need, then we need to build upon existing strengths, target dynamic needs with services and interventions, and understand the young person's environment and the socio-historical context that impacts their day-to-day lives. Let's look at this a little bit more closely and pull out that key information. So strengths or protective factors decrease the harmful effects of the risk factors present. We can build upon the existing strengths of a young person to mitigate the risks associated with their needs. Now recall that dynamic needs, or the needs that are risk factors that can potentially change with services and interventions. Addressing dynamic needs can reduce the likelihood of juvenile justice system involvement. Many of the risks or needs a young person may present with are directly related to their socio-historical context. We cannot understand their true needs if we are unable to discern and distinguish between the impact of their environment and their actual needs. Now in Module 3, we focused on case planning and management that can help us identify needs, engage youth in services, and better understand if and how the services or interventions are working as intended. Just to bring a finer point to this, and I'll cover this slide one more time. I covered this in Module 3 as well. Case planning is driven by a needs assessment and helps us to identify criminogenic risks or the warning signs, pathways that we discussed in Module 1. Remember that case plan management is ongoing. It occurs over a period of time where we meet with youth to ensure that the interventions are working as intended and there is progress being made on those goals. Remember those SMART goals that we practice with in Module 3. And then remember that this is interrelated, right? So case planning and management are both individualized. Both should include youth voice and choice in determining what needs to prioritize or what type of services they feel they need. Both case planning and management are comprehensive in that we engage in understanding the strengths, needs, and socio-historical context that impact the youth's ability to engage in the services being coordinated. And remember that both are flexible in terms of understanding the priorities, the services, and the needs of the youth can shift over time. After this training, it's important to consider several recommendations that can increase your ability to develop an effective case plan and manage those case plans. Some of these recommendations are changes that likely need to take place at a system level, and I encourage you to engage your colleagues, your supervisors, or other stakeholders to implement a validated assessment to assess for criminogenic needs and strengths, to better identify the socio-historical impact of a young person's environment, using the assessment results to drive service delivery. That may mean developing an actual protocol or procedure to be able to do that well. Develop individualized case plans and goals. Remember in Module 3, we talked a lot about and practiced with the SMART goal methodology. And so that's something that you might need to implement on a system level. Then think about changing your practice and how you schedule ongoing and frequent case management meetings. Consider what you're doing now, and maybe it's every 60 days or every 90 days. And think about the goals or the interventions or the skills that you're trying to help youth build. Do more frequent meetings, lend themselves to that youth being more successful in achieving those attainable goals. And then finally, conduct reassessments to measure reductions in risk and needs. So we should be able to tell that youth are engaging in interventions through attendance records or certificates of completion, just monitoring that engagement with the service itself. But we also want to be mindful of, did we actually reduce that risk and need with the interventions that we put in place? Now recall that through line that I mentioned in Module 3. Remember, we want to make sure that there's a through line that runs from the domain under that assessment through the intervention and those desired outcomes, which will likely then result in reductions in that risk and need. So those recommendations are important to consider. There might be some that are system level, like I said, so you might need to become a champion in this respect to champion changes in these areas. But there's other things that we can do on an individual level. So I want us to think about, to begin thinking about, what is it that we can do? And then consider the type of support that you might need from your colleagues or from your supervisors to implement some of the things that you learned during this training. So in your workbook, we've added 3 main questions as prompts. First, what can you do? Meaning, are there any strategies that you can implement now without system-wide implementation? For example, can you commit to working with youth to prioritize what they want to work on first? Or can you begin using the SMART methodology when you are drafting case plans? Second, What do you need from your colleagues? For example, are there resource directories that could help you better understand the services and interventions available in your community? And finally, what do you need from your supervisor? For example, if your department isn't using a validated assessment, are you able to connect with your supervisor to champion the implementation of a validated assessment? At this point, we've come to the main questions as prompts. First, what can you do? Meaning, are there any strategies that you can implement now without system-wide implementation? For example, can you commit to working with youth to prioritize what they want to work on first? Or can you begin using the SMART methodology when you are drafting case plan goals? Second, what do you need from your colleagues? For example, are there resource directories that could help you better understand the services and interventions available in your community? And finally, what do you need from your supervisors? For example, if your department isn't using a validated assessment, are you able to connect with your supervisor to champion the implementation of a new validated assessment? These prompts are in your workbook with several lines for you to jot down a few things that you would like to commit to changing, and for you to think about, is it on the individual level? Can I get this from my colleagues? And what do I need from my supervisor? So at this point, we have come to the end of the crossover prevention case planning for child welfare workers training. And I hope that you are able to make some small or big changes in the way that you work with youth on your caseload as a result of participating in this training. I also want to thank the Annie E. Casey Foundation for providing the funding support to develop the training, as well as the National Association for the Council of Children for providing the research and evidence that guided the content.